Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why we put people on upper lower splits instead of full body. And I think that this can sound like a contradiction when I talk about this being a necessity eventually, because I'm someone who taught people for a long time that you should be able to make your new gains on full body programs 3 times a week. And we have a pretty successful history of most people successfully doing that. In fact, a lot of people out there have run some of my free programs over the many years I've been doing this, who have said, they stalled for a long time and thought they weren't a novice, went back and ran these programs and made the best gains of their life. So, why is it that at a certain point, most people eventually do better on a 4 day upper lower? And it has to come down to the need for individual training volume. Now, that being said, if a person switches from full body to an upper lower 4 day a week with appropriate volume, with appropriate workloads, and they train hard, even if they do it sooner than is ideal, they'll probably still be okay. And that's the thing that people need to remember. It's just that they won't gain any advantage from doing it, right? Now, I don't have an issue with someone saying, well, I'm still technically a novice and I went over to a solid upper lower type program. Is it going to hurt my progress? No, probably not, especially if you spent a little time squatting 3 days a week. If you learned to squat and you did squatting 3 days a week for a little while, even as a novice on a linear progression program, right, doing full body, and you go over to it, I don't think you'll have any problems at all as long as you run a good upper lower. A person could even run stuff like they've seen me do here. They could even run scaled down versions of conjugate. In fact, I program most of my clients on upper lowers, right? Well, at least up until we ran into some of these problems with gyms closing all over the world. But that aside, a lot of my guys who have access to gyms, we go to upper lowers fairly early. I have guys who only squat, 225, who we go to upper lower 4 day a week. Now, they're not going to be always a traditional that you think of just squat, bench, deadlift, because their lower days tend to be comprised very heavily of the box squat, the sumo deadlift, and the good morning. And then upper days tend to be bench press and row base with other auxiliary presses and whatever other lifts they need. We still keep it very simple. Probably around 6 big barbell lifts with a small amount of supplemental work. And people would say, well, why? Why would we go to the upper lower? Well, simply put, we go to it when we need more intra-session training volume. Okay? It is very difficult at a certain point for people to get enough volume for certain muscle groups inside of a full body workout. It can be very difficult. And particularly what ends up happening is that we run out a lot of steam with our lower body sometimes. And what ends up happening is that things like squats tend to dominate the whole situation. If we're squatting 3 days a week on a full body program, at a certain point we always squat first because we kind of have to. It's taxing. It doesn't leave us a lot to get other leg volume in, because once we've done the squatting can take a long time to set up and execute. And then to do other lifts, people end up running out of time very quickly. So if you get enough upper body volume to stimulate adequate muscle growth, and you've done squats first, the rest of your lower body tends to actually lag. It's not the issue that the upper body doesn't get enough stimulus always. In some cases it doesn't. A lot of times it's at the lower body because people just don't want to do anything else. And it can happen very quickly. Once you start to reach a little bit of a strength base, there are times when we run out of steam doing like 5 sets of squats or even 3 sets of squats. Maybe then we do okay at a bench press, some rows, other stuff. But by the time we're done with that, nobody wants to do other lower body work. And the problem that we run into is that we end up losing a lot of posterior chain potential. Right? So that's one of the things that oftentimes doesn't get enough volume. Now, people will say, well, couldn't you just throw in a bunch of some sumo deadlifts and good mornings? Yeah, but how many exercises are we going to do at that point? Because what are we going to need at minimum to stimulate the upper body? At least 3 movements. At least 3 movements, if not 4. So if you've done squats and you do 3 movements, let's just throw it out there. Let's say it's not even all barbell stuff. Let's say instead of overhead press, you do dips. Because I have no problem with someone replacing overhead press with dips. I have no issue with that as long as they're getting enough total delt work from the pulling end. They're doing face pulls and stuff. Plenty of rowing, they'll probably be fine. They could bench press, dip, do some rows, maybe some curls. Think anybody wants to deadlift or do good mornings after all of that? You know, especially if you've done 3 big upper body movements after squatting. Posterior chain tends to get neglected. We run into the same issue with the upper body, of course. We run into the same issue. We run out of steam. It's hard to get enough training volume in if you've done multiple limit sets of squats. Very hard to get our upper body training volume in, if not impossible. Okay, it becomes an issue. And we're doing all of this for the purpose of what? Getting 3 workouts in, of hitting everything 3 times a week. Well, that works great for the novice. I'm not going to lie, it works great for the novice up until a certain point. And the problem we run into is that due to different genetics, different need for training volumes, I think one of the big things we run into, people who are a little slightly better on the fast twitch dominant side, I'm not saying they're fast twitch dominant, versus people who really seem to need more training volume, who are really unexplosive. Genetically, I've noticed the guys who really lack any explosiveness genetically. Right? Very endurance fiber oriented people. And humans are all dominant with endurance fibers, by the way. We're a slow twitch dominant species. I've noticed those people seem to need the higher volume much, much quicker. And this is based on my observations coaching, doing intakes of clients and seeing their history of training and where they are. I've noticed that people who do not respond, they make really good gains for a short period of time on a full body 3-day a week. And then particularly things like their upper body lag, they really struggle to make progress after a very quick burst. I've noticed that especially if they can't lift explosively, all their lifting looks slow. Those people need more training volume very, very quickly. They just don't do as well for a long period of time on that program. They need the higher intra-session volume much sooner than other people. Guys who are just a little bit thicker genetically, maybe people who are a little better at fast twitch stuff, people who are a little bit explosive, they can run the full body out a lot longer and make really good gains. Right? I made good gains for a long time on full body. I've coached friends of mine over the years who made phenomenal gains for a year straight on full body. But I look at that and we all had similar traits in terms of our genetic response to training. That maybe biased me. And a big, big segment of the population, probably half of the population, does quite well for a full year on it. Some people don't. And those people need to go to that split sooner. Now, eventually, almost everyone will benefit more from going to the 4-day upper lower. That's what I prescribe basically for anyone who's like an intermediate or higher. It's usually what I tell people to do. And I don't put out a lot of programs for that because I would like to push people into the direction of just concurrent and particularly conjugate type training by that threshold. And I put out enough material on these systems that people can start piecing it together. Right? I mean, I can eventually probably make some templates on it, and I probably will. But that's a longer term thing. I could probably do so. And I think a lot of people would benefit from that. But the problem we have too with a lot of the conjugate stuff of putting out templates, people don't have, I don't know what equipment you have access to. Right? Therefore, it makes it harder to prescribe those things. It would end up needing to be a whole dang book just to write a basic template. But the point is, eventually, everybody needs that higher intra-session volume for a given muscle group. And we have to have it. And at a certain point, if you can just hit that twice a week, you're going to probably nearly maximize your muscle growth, which is what I've kind of explained before with the problem with the 6-day upper lower. Most people could end up cramming a little more volume into 2 days instead of 3 and end up getting better overall gains from it and better overall recovery. And it's not just me who notices that. There's plenty of top coaches around the world. So the problem we run into is that the more novice you are, the more you'll benefit from that really high frequency, that 3-day a week. But at a certain threshold, and that threshold really tremendously varies between your work capacity and genetics. It really varies massively as to what point we benefit from the upper lower 4-day. But you know what? I find that it's not a problem even with clients to take them to the 4-day sooner rather than later. They don't seem to suffer any negatives from it. The full body 3-day a week is just really good for quick early gains in a novice lifter. And that's really where it shines. And it's phenomenal for that. It's unbeatable for that. But I feel like at a certain threshold, oftentimes even within the first year of training, the 4-day upper lower doesn't have any negatives. You don't lose benefits by switching to it, right? Well, oftentimes the gains will be about the same, but then you're already there when you've reached the threshold where it's better. Just my observation. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.